welcome to Good Grief, a podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief, compassion, and sometimes humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today, we're going to talk about post-hike depression. So I'm going to stipulate this as this is a little maybe not self-serving. Okay, it's a little self-serving, sure. Very personal, given my current situation. But we can also apply this to like other things besides just hiking. So anyway, as you know, I was gone for quite a while. I'm back. I'm back earlier than expected. And I'll get into that in a bit. But just in case you did not know or missed an episode or two, my husband and I were hiking the Long Trail in Vermont. And the Long Trail is the oldest through hiking trail in the United States. It was the inspiration for the Appalachian Trail. It was formed in 1910. It is 273 miles long, and it goes from the Massachusetts-Vermont state border up to Vermont-Canada border. And it follows along the ridges of the Green Mountains, which are the oldest mountains in the world. So I was on the oldest trail in America, on the oldest mountains in the world, and it was probably the most amazing thing I've ever done, to date anyway. As I said, we're back a little earlier than expected. We got back a couple days ago. We ended up leaving the trail at mile 182. So we didn't quite finish. We got to a point about maybe a weekend when we realized, I don't think we're going to be able to finish this. Because I had 5 weeks off work. And we started on Monday, August 1st. And I knew, like, neither one of us wanted to be hiking up to the last day and then have to drive 14 hours home from the Canadian-Vermont border and immediately wake up and go to work the next day. Plus, Brendan had to be back to work a little earlier than I did. So we knew we needed to give ourselves like at least a 4 or 5 day buffer at the end of our hike to recoup, drive home. So we got to a point where we realized we were not going to finish. And we said, we'll just keep going. We'll go as far as we can, and then we'll come back next year and finish. And we just got to a point where Brendan had a foot injury. It wasn't anything serious. He could still walk, but his foot was starting to swell up a bit, and we were concerned. And we also got to, geologically the perfect point to stop at, because my car was parked up at the end. And we knew we were going to have to rent a car or somehow find a ride up there to pick it up. And Vermont is very remote. I don't know if you guys knew this. There's not much there. And there weren't many big towns north of like Burlington, Montpelier. So those were the last places we'd be able to rent a car. And we were right about there when we decided, you know what? I think we're done. So that's where we quit. All the details. This is not about my hike. This show is about grief. This show is about grief. Ooh, you guys, I've been out of the woods for a long time. Okay. So I was trying to think of a nice topic we could discuss that would be somewhat related to my hike. And so I had read multiple times before about post-trail depression, post-hike depression. And this is more of the things I've heard about this in the past are people who have hiked the Appalachian Trail, because that is something that can take you up to 6 to 8 months to complete. So that's a better part of a year that you're spending in the woods and in towns and whatever, just hiking, basically, living off your backpack. And to suddenly go from that back to quote unquote real life, it's jarring is what it is. It's a huge shift. It's almost like the first couple days of hiking something like that. You know, you're going from, let's just say, you know, you have a desk job and you're working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, working for the weekend at, you know, your desk job. And then all of a sudden you're just out in the woods living out of a backpack. And the first few days of that are a little jarring. And then when you come back to quote unquote reality, that's a little jarring too. But like I said, this doesn't necessarily just have to do with through hiking or, you know, a hike or, you know, something like that. This could be any post-vacation depression. Some people get that too. Like, especially if you go on a somewhat longer vacation than you're used to. You went somewhere for 3 weeks instead of 1, or you just got to experience something incredibly life-altering or big, and then it's over and you have to go back to your quote-unquote like real life, normal life, right? And it's hard. It's hard to make that shift back into normalcy. Normal is different now, especially if it's something longer or something bigger or something that may have changed your life. Like we talk about COVID, when people started going back into the offices again, and how kind of hard that was for some people. Some people were they loved it. They were like, yay, I'm back, I can be around people again. And some people were like, well, I just got used to being at home all the time, and especially people that had families that suddenly got to spend all their time with their family. I mean, sure, they were working at home, but they got to be with their kids all day or be with their spouse all day. And that was another interesting part of this hike, was like my husband and I were never really out of eye shot of each other for more than a few minutes for the past like month. And prior to COVID, outside of COVID, that's the first time we've done that probably ever. Like the first few weeks of COVID, we were just on top of each other. Not literally, well, neither here nor there. We were just like constantly around each other at home. People going back to work after COVID and spending so much time with their family, it was hard. It was depressing. They missed their family, and that's completely understandable. It makes perfect sense. So this doesn't necessarily just have to be about, a through hike or something like that. We can equivalent this to any large life experience. Let's say, you adopted a child from another country, and you and your significant other, or you by yourself, traveled, all the way to Argentina to adopt a child, or Russia, and you spent, a month out of your life traveling and bringing home this, beautiful child, and then your life is very different. I'm not necessarily saying you'll get depressed, because I would think adopting a child would be a wonderful, happy thing. But your life is very different after that. You've gone through something life-altering, and then when you're suddenly back at work again, and your newly adopted child is in daycare or with, somebody else, some other caretaker, it's jarring. It's hard to wrap your brain around the fact that you're back to quote-unquote normal, but it's not normal anymore. It's very different. Okay, so anyway, I pulled up a bunch of articles, some I've read in the past and some new ones I just found. I just Google searched post-hike depression, and I was blown away by how much came up, first of all. And a lot of the articles were on websites of like gear companies that sell like backpacking gear. And they're like, hey man, because it's one of those things that it's not often talked about, like a lot of depression, and I can imagine somebody who 20 years old, they're taking a break from life and they're like, I'm going to go hike the AT. And then they come home and they feel awful and they feel alone and they don't know why. So there's all these companies that are like, hey, what you're feeling is normal, right? Like I'm always saying, it's normal. So there's one article on The Trek, which I love this website, thetrek.co. The author of this article, Ann Baker, I've read a few of her articles. She's lovely. She interviewed a bunch of thru hikers who had recently transitioned from trail life to, quote unquote, normal life. So she spoke with a bunch of people to kind of get an idea of what post-trail depression was like for them, and what were some of the themes and common threads, so to speak. So just a concept of adventure that you don't always get. I mean, there are bits of adventure if you look for it in everyday life, but you're literally on an adventure every single day when you're hiking, and you go from that back to sitting at a desk, staring at a computer screen, looking at your phone, watching TV, and that's gone. A sense of community. One of the most beautiful things I love about hiking and hiking culture, especially through hiking, is the community. And you will meet, like we both talked about all the Appalachian Trail hikers we met. Because the first part of the long trail is connected with the Appalachian Trail. So we're all kind of on the same trail, and then they branch off and we keep going north. And we met so many Appalachian Trail through hikers, and there's just this beautiful community of people, and nobody's asking you who you voted for in the last election. Nobody's asking you what your beliefs are on religion. It's just, you're going through this thing together, and you can commiserate, like, man, that last mountain peak was awful. And that one boulder that was like loose and everybody kept falling. You have this thing you can all come together on, right? The kind of misery and physical exertion of doing the hike, and you talk about your gear and everything else. It's just such a really cool community, and we learned a lot, obviously, because we'd never done a through hike before. So getting to talk with some of these AT hikers, we got to learn a lot about through hiking and got, some advice and, the best towns to hit for resupplies, and, oh, don't go to that one thing, things like that. Like, don't waste your time here, go here. And it was just such a really cool community. And then they're gone now. I mean, most of these people we didn't see for more than a day or two anyway, because we're very slow. But there was no sense of fakeness. Like, there was no sense of anybody trying to be something they're not. We were all just there and existing and, enjoying company and nature. And you don't see that all the time in quote unquote real life, in the civilized world. I hate using that term. But in civilization and everyday life, it's different, you view people with a different eye. There's also, this is something I'm working with right now. You're going from, the most extreme physical exertion I've ever felt in my life. And then immediately after, we spent, several days in the car. Because since we left early, we decided to hit a couple places on the East Coast to visit some friends and family. So we just spent, 4 days driving, basically, after quite literally walking, miles and miles and miles every single day up and down actual mountains. So my body is just, the first couple of days it was nice, but my body was just destroyed. I tried to work out for the first time this morning and I pulled my hamstring. So I've been talking a lot about just hiking, and I said I wouldn't do that, so I apologize. But in the end all be all, unrelated to hiking or anything, when you've gone through something big, and then suddenly you're thrust back into your quote-unquote normal life, and you're surrounded by people that did not experience what you did, it's hard. It's like any shift from one way of life to another very suddenly. It's going to leave you feeling a little off-kilter, a little strange and sad. There's no other way to put it. It's going to be sad. Especially if it's been something wonderful. Again, if you just went on a really amazing once-in-a-lifetime vacation, you got to go to Europe for a month. My parents are finally going to get to go to their big trip to Australia and New Zealand coming up. They're supposed to be for their 50th wedding anniversary, but that was in 2020, and I think we all remember what happened there. So they're finally going to get to do their trip here pretty soon, and that's huge. They're going for a month or 5 weeks, I think, to Australia and New Zealand. I can't imagine how phenomenal that trip is going to be for them, and I'm so happy. But I also can't imagine how they're going to feel when they get back, because they've experienced this thing, and they're going to come back here to their friends and their family who did not experience that with them. And we've all just been going on with our lives as normal, and they've had this experience. And it's hard, you can share it with people who weren't there, oh, we saw this, we did this, there's all these pictures. I wrote a blog every single day that I posted so people could kind of see what we were doing on our trip. But, nobody else really experienced that with you. So it's hard to recognize that the world continues on. I know it sounds narcissistic, but sometimes it's hard to recognize that the world is continuing on without you. You've gone off to do this thing, but the world just keeps going. It didn't, just because your world stopped for a while, the rest of the world did not. And that's kind of a hard concept to grasp. And it's upsetting to a degree. It's I was off doing this amazing thing, but you just, went on with your life and did all these other things. It's narcissistic, but we're all a little self-centered. Let's just face it. We're all a little self-centered at times, It's hard to remember that there's a whole world out there that exists without us. And it's continued on while we were doing something spectacular or life-altering or awful. Okay, so what do we do? what do we do when we have this post-hike or post-amazing thing depression or funk, whatever you want to call it if you don't want to use the word depression? What do we do? Okay, well, there's the usual things I'll suggest. Talk to somebody. Especially if you did this with somebody, like my husband and I did this hike together, so we can lean on each other. And we've actually talked about it a little bit, like, oh my God, everything just feels so weird, and I'm in a funk, and, we can lean on each other for that, because we've both experienced that. So if you know somebody, or if, let's say, I went by myself, but I knew of a friend who did the same hike like 5 years ago, I could call that friend and be like, dude, I feel like crap. And they'll get it, then we can talk together about that. So talking about it helps, or even talking with somebody who hasn't been through it. It's like somebody you trust. If it's, obviously, I'll always say this, if it's interfering with your daily life and you need more serious help, seek professional help. It's okay. Cool. All right. Also, I'm never one to talk about distracting yourself, because that's doing you a disservice. Because like I always say, you have to walk with your grief. You can't ignore it. You can't walk away from it. You can't distract yourself from it. You have to face your grief. You have to learn to walk with it. But if you find something else that you can kind of focus on for a little bit of time, like, writing, so many people write a book about hiking the Appalachian Trail. I've read several, and after a while it's like they're all the same, right? Everybody who hikes this stinking AT has to write a book about it, and that's fine. Maybe write a blog, or, write for yourself, write in a journal about everything you saw and did, and just kind of get it all out and revisit those. Look at photos on your trip, and, go ahead and, I don't want to say dwell, but just relive those moments, live in them again in your mind and in your memory. It's totally okay. Make some kind of project out of it. Or if it's something like hiking, or you went through something tragic or something huge, use some of your energy to help other people who might want to do these things, who might find a way to donate money to a cause to let underprivileged kids go on a trip to Europe, or school kids. There are always kids that with school groups are going on trips to Washington, D.C., or, I took a really cool trip when I was 18 through the Spanish Club to Mexico. I got to go to Mexico when I was 18, and it was so cool. And, we had to raise money for that. So help other people get to do something that you got to do, Or if, donate your time. One thing Brendan and I talked about doing is during peak hiking season, if we're not hiking, driving somewhere near the Appalachian Trail and being trail angels. So trail angels, just briefly, are people who give things or themselves or their services to hikers just for free out of the kindness of their heart. Giving them a ride into town to pick up groceries or do laundry, give them a place to stay for the night. Or sometimes people just set up a tent and cook food all day. They make hot dogs or hamburgers, or have a cooler full of cold drinks that, as through hikers walk by, hey man, here's a burger, and we got to experience that actually a couple times. There was a guy parked in a parking lot. We had to cross a very busy freeway. And there's a guy parked in the parking lot who was giving out ice cream sandwiches to the hikers that came through. And he gave Brendan a beer. Brendan got a free beer out of it. We actually ran into that same guy later at another parking lot who's giving away ice cream sandwiches. And he also offered to take trash, which is huge for thru hikers, because you have to pack out all your trash. Obviously, there's nowhere to put it, so you have to carry it with you. So you're just carrying out a bag of trash until you can find a trash can. That's huge, guys. So anyway, donate your time. Help out other people that might be trying to do the same thing that you did. It's a beautiful thing to do. So that's really about it with this episode. And I apologize. I know this was a whole lot about hiking, right? This podcast is not about hiking. It's about grief. But like I said, you can equate this to a myriad of other things in your life. Like I said, a great vacation, or any life-altering event that you are now in the other end of. It is now in the past, and you are trying to adapt back to your normal life. So, as always, Don't be afraid to ask for help. Talk to people. Do what's best for you. But don't walk away from your grief. Just learn to live with it. Learn to accept it. Learn to let it guide you, and you can help guide it in return. If that makes any sense. Does it? I don't know. Guys, my brain is not functioning on all cylinders yet. I'm still working on getting back into the swing of things. First time I looked at my computer, my brain hurt for like 20 minutes and I had to walk away. So anyway, I will post in the show notes, is the word I was looking for, the couple of articles I read about this, and I'll also give you the Wikipedia article on what the Long Trail is, just in case you're curious about the hike I did. And next year, we'll be going back to finish. We have 91 miles left to hike. We're kind of hoping we can get that done in under 2 weeks. We can get that done in under 2 weeks. Oh, Lord. Anyway, but honestly, we already finished the hardest part of the trail, so we heard. So we're good to go. We just have the tallest peak in Vermont left. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now I will read from the Death Deck. So I'm shuffling. And I'm going to pick one at random. And, I've already read that one. All right, let's pick another one. Oh, geez. How flippin' appropriate is this? So this one is called Profound Experience. Share a profound religious or spiritual experience you have had. How did it change your beliefs about life and death? Okay. Well, that's more religious or spiritual, not just profound experience. Wow. Well, that's definitely something for y'all to think about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be religious in nature, but let me think about this. For me, and this is going to get real deep for the end of the episode, I guess I would have to say there was a time, this was a very long time ago, very, very long time ago, when I was feeling suicidal, and I'm not going to go into the details of what all was happening in my life at the time, because it was not all good. But I was really contemplating taking my own life, and I just felt I could almost like hear a physical voice say something to the effect of, it's okay, you're not alone, I love you. And I don't know. I mean, you could say a million things. You could say it was a voice of God talking to me, and I'm not necessarily a super religious person. You could just say it was, the voice of all the people that did love me in my head that I knew I may not have consciously known was there, but subconsciously known was there, speaking to me. So, because it was almost like a light switch. I swear it was almost like a physical voice, but I could just hear somebody say, it's okay, you're not alone, I love you. And, yeah, like that almost instantly was a light switch. And I was like, what am I doing? I don't want to end my life. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, like I said, that was a little deep. Yeah. I guess I'll go with that. Shoot, guys. Okay. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can find me at nikkithedeathdoula.com. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have ideas for shows. I have had people send me some topic ideas. I am keeping a list, and I will absolutely keep those in mind and work on those. If you have a fun story you want to tell, maybe if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast and tell a story about grief, let me know. We'll might be able to work something out. And don't forget to check me out on Patreon. I know everybody's got a stupid Patreon, but all my Patreon funds go to me being able to provide pro bono work to people that cannot afford my services. So it's for good cause. And, like all Patreon things, you can get some special, unique perks that the everyday peoples don't get to have. So, okay, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful week, and just remember, you're not alone, and your grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief was brought to you by me. You can find me online at nikkithedeathdoula.com. Today's episode was produced by me. Research and scripts written by me. Your host is me. Editing and sound design also me. Music is not me. Music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. License information can be found at filmmusic.io/standard-license. Special thank you to my best friend and husband for constantly reassuring me that I don't suck.